Hey guys, welcome back to my Ask Jessi Q&A series, in which people write in asking about whatever they want and I answer. So today I have a question from someone anonymously who wrote, "You talk a lot about getting your emotional needs met, which is so helpful. I'm an introvert and I've done a lot of work to recognize that I'm worthy of taking up more space and time to recharge alone, but I still feel bad about turning down plans sometimes because I don't want people to think I don't like them. My question though is there a limit? I mean, how much is too much? Sometimes I feel if I started actually taking the alone time that I needed, I would never stop and I would never go out. How do you know where the limit is?" Amazing question. So I'm going to answer this specifically, but also we're going to look at a little bit more of a macro scale of this because I think that specifically regarding introversion, this is helpful, but also actually every emotional need follows this pattern. So the pattern is that deprivation causes fixation. Meaning, if you're not getting enough of something, if you've never gotten enough of something, or not in a long time has this emotional need that you have ever been fulfilled, that you start to obsess about getting it filled and fixate on what it would feel like to get filled, to get enough of it, to get tons of it. And an easy way that we see this is with like food. So if you have been deprived due to a diet, then you're going to start, or just lack of access to food, you're going to start obsessing about food. We see this proven over and over in studies. A bunch of people with healthy relationships to food who are put on a diet start to obsess about food, dream about food, think about food, want to eat massive, massive quantities of food. And maybe you've experienced this if you've ever been like on a diet, you say no sugar or something, and then all of a sudden you're like, I just want to like bathe in a bathtub of ice cream. Like I want 10,000 gallons of soda or whatever. It's like the thing that you're craving. You just imagine, oh my God, I want so much of it. And then you start to get scared because you're like, well, shit, if I give myself one and I'm going to want 100 more, that's like a slippery slope. So we start to get afraid that there's this beast inside of us to get our needs met that's like telling you like, get this need met, hey, I really need this thing. But we become afraid of that voice because we're afraid that it means we will just never be satisfied, that we'll just keep going and going and gorge ourselves, or whatever it is. But the truth is that the deprivation is what causes that obsessive need, that feeling like you can never get enough. That beast is created by deprivation. And this is true in almost every case in terms of every need that you have. So if you think about this in terms of introversion, it sounds like the binge that comes after a diet, like that's what you're dreaming of. You're dreaming of an introversion binge, which tells me that there's been a deprivation of alone time in your life. Maybe because you didn't feel comfortable establishing boundaries or saying no to people. Maybe because you live in a busy world and a busy culture, and it's like, I have my job, that's plenty, and then I want to have a social life, that's too much. Because really, it is kind of hard to be an introvert and get enough alone time without really seriously establishing boundaries, and then just sticking to them. So what I'm hearing is that you have gone through this deprivation for so long that now the idea of getting enough alone time is like such a fantasy, such an obsessive, like, oh my God, I only want to be alone forever. And if I let myself have a little alone time, won't I just keep going? Or what if I let myself have more and then I want more? It's like this feeling of out of controlness, which is literally only caused by the deprivation. It is the deprivation's creation that this urge to be alone all the time exists. So once you stop feeling deprived, you won't have this unfillable urge anymore. It'll go away. Same with food. Like you might go through a period if you stop dieting of a few weeks or months even of just like eating Pop-Tarts every day, but eventually you're going to crave salad and protein. It's what happens. And that is to say that it feels like your emotional needs don't have an end point, like you'll never get enough of them. And so that feels very scary and out of control, but I'm here to promise you there is an endpoint. If you give yourself enough of what you need, if you feel abundant about what you need and you don't feel deprived, there will be an endpoint. You will eventually satisfy that need. You will and you can and you should eventually satisfy that need, which is to say that you can truly feel fulfilled and relaxed and like satisfied by your alone time if you no longer feel like there's a scarcity of it. If you know that you can really be done, yes, that was the alone time I needed. Go back into the world, go to a party or go to work or whatever, come back and then get even more alone time. So when you have abundance around this emotional need being met, just like, oh, if I want a Pop-Tart, I'll just have one at any time, as opposed to being on a diet where you're like, no more sugar. that's what makes you be like, then I need a Pop-Tart now. In fact, I need 10 Pop-Tarts. I need 1,000 Pop-Tarts. But if you give yourself full abundance of the thing, the need being met that you want, eventually you will be fully satisfied, and then you will just go back out and eventually recreate the need for it, because that's how introversion works, right? You go spend your social energy, and then you charge alone. So that's how this is going to work. So just know that it is true for every single emotional need, every need really in general, that there is an end point, even though it doesn't feel like there's an end point. The reason it doesn't feel like there's an end point and you've got this beast inside of you is because of deprivation. So with that in mind, the only way to get to the point where you feel like your needs can be met in abundance is by giving yourself so much of them. And this can feel really silly or even ridiculous or scary, and a lot of people feel unworthy of doing this, but I swear to God it works, so trust me. I've done this with all of my needs, and it is really incredible. What you have to do is give yourself tons and tons and tons of the thing that you're craving, the thing that you're wanting, this emotional need, getting it met. And do that along with not holding the mentality anymore that you have to limit yourself at some point. So literally the exercise that I'm going to give you is give yourself as much as you need, no matter how ridiculous that amount is, because eventually there will be an end point. So even if it feels like gluttonous, you're like, but I just want to be alone for the next 3 weeks. Great, go be alone for the next 3 weeks. But eventually, if you truly give yourself what you actually need and you have this backlash binge of whatever it is, eventually you will be done. And you'll be like, I'm bored. I want to go hang out with people. Like, I want to call my friend. I want to go do a thing. And it will come back. You will absolutely find your way back if you give yourself everything that you need. So that is to say, you can only reach the end point when you truly give yourself enough of your need or craving or whatever. And the abundance mindset that goes with it, meaning you know that you can go out and socialize and come right back home and be alone. You have to know that that's always available to you. If it doesn't feel available to you, you're going to go right back into a scarcity mindset. So the mindset matters. So think about with food, like if you are dieting and then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to give myself all the sugar I want, but then I'm going to go right back to dieting, you still have a scarcity mindset. You're still going to want all the sugar forever. If you say, I'll have sugar whenever I want, but I'll just have it until I don't want it anymore, and then when I want it again, I can have it again, that's when the deprivation truly goes away. That is the abundance mindset that we're looking for in terms of getting your needs met and your desires met. So give yourself permission to binge. I swear, fully binge on the thing that you want. Binge on the introverted alone time that is truly restorative to you. Give yourself the full amount until you're done, until you're sick of it, until you're like bored and tired of it and like craving and urging yourself to go socialize. Do that, and then recognize that the next time you go out, do it consciously, and then that you can have as much alone time as you want after that too. That is going to make this need feel satiating, truly like you're getting your introversion needs met, finally fulfilled, you know? And it's going to take a lot of the stress out of your social time, because you know that you can always return to that chamber of isolation that you have been dreaming about for so long. And it might take time. It might take weeks or months, could even take years to find your true balance if you've been in a deprived state for years or decades. That makes sense. The same is true with food. People who learn to eat intuitively, sometimes it takes months, years even, to get to a place where they can eat normal, because they have to go through this backlash in which they're giving themselves permission to have all of the things that for decades they were deprived of via an eating disorder or dieting or whatever. So give yourself permission to binge on whatever the thing is that your needs are not being met yet or are not being fulfilled yet, and just have tons and tons and tons of it. And I want to give an example of a different emotional need, which would be like for attention. So a lot of women tell me that they're like, I feel like I really crave attention, but I don't want to ask for it because I'm afraid that if I started getting some, I would never stop. And I'm like, great. That tells me that there was deprivation, that you didn't get the attention you needed somewhere, somehow, some way, in a partnership, in your family, growing up. If you didn't get it from your parents, if you're not getting enough now, you just don't feel seen in your life, then you're going to feel that way. There's going to be this like driving beast inside you that's like, get attention, any way you can get it'll do. But also, you're not going to go get attention in a way that's fulfilling, and you're not going to trust that if you ever got that attention or asked for that attention, it would ever stop. You're like, I'm not going to let the beast out of the cage. That would be madness. So just trust me. Trust that there is an end point to that need, that you can get enough attention to truly feel fulfilled, and then you won't need it anymore. Or, like the introversion, you'll get fulfilled, and then you'll go spend that energy somewhere else, and then you'll need it again. You'll need to refuel that tank. So the example there would be like, well, great. How do you go get your need met if what you need is attention? You flood yourself with attention. You start a blog. You take up improv. You do stand up. You join Toastmasters. You do a local theater production. You become a cam girl, or you do like exhibitionist stuff where people are looking at you in whatever way feels good to you and feels right, feels nourishing for you. And eventually, I swear, you will run out. The need will be fulfilled. And that dragon that's like, there's never enough, that scarcity-driven, deprivation-created dragon will just go to sleep and be like, oh, thanks for all the attention. So much of what people think is wrong with them, that they're like, I don't know why I'm like this, I can never get enough, is actually a lack of trust that their emotional needs have an endpoint. And so the only way to prove to yourself that they have an endpoint is to binge on the thing you want most and get to that endpoint where you're like, think about like with sex. If you're ever like sex starved, sex deprived, you're like, oh my God, I need to have sex so goddamn bad. Anyone will do right now. And then think about how you feel at the end of a weekend of like tons of sex. And you're like, yeah, I'm done. Like, I don't need to be touched for a while. There's a satiation point in all of our needs. It feels really urgent when we're not getting them met, but when you really get them met, you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna go do another thing then, It's like, oh, well, now that urge is done, that dragon is sleeping, I got shit to do. I'm gonna go focus on like making creative work or, my friendships or whatever. Like, the sex is covered. I'm done with that for a bit. And eventually the need will come back because that's how our needs work. But from there on, you will trust that there is an endpoint, that you can get enough, you can satiate that need. Trusting that you can get your needs met is a huge, huge deal. If you don't believe you can get to the end of them, you will never try. You will be always holding yourself back, really restraining yourself because you're afraid that if you let yourself get 30% of the need met, you'll just want more, that the dragon will run loose and take over the world. So recognize that fear. Recognize when you're holding yourself back. Anytime you're like, I really want this thing, but I don't know, I'm afraid of like letting myself start, that's probably the fear of the dragon. So it's important that we recognize that dragon was only created out of deprivation. And the only way to get that dragon off your back and to have him take a nap is to flood it with the exact thing, getting the needs met that you have been craving. And so much of it with so much abundance that you finally can just rest and focus on other shit because that need is taken care of and you're no longer afraid of being overwhelmed or drowned by it. So that is to say, do it, do it, do it. Go take all of the alone time that you could ever possibly want. Tell everyone in your life you're doing an experiment. Be like, listen, I'm doing an introversion boot camp. So for all of this month, I won't be hanging out with literally anybody. Don't invite me to anything. And then only come out of the boot camp when you're bored and want social attention. Come out when you're ready to spend and you want to spend and you're excited to spend that energy on other people. Not when you feel like you should or you think it's been long enough or because someone is pressuring you. Don't do that. Only do it for you when that need has truly deeply been fulfilled, when you've been submerged in introversion enough and you're done. Your dragon is asleep. You're like, well, now I have nobody to hang out with. I want to go, tend to my social dragon. So recognize that this only works if you don't go back to the dieting version, the deprivation version, meaning you can't just give yourself a boot camp and then go back to life as usual and expect yourself to now feel fully satiated all the time. Because it sounds like life as usual for you has not been enough alone time. So you're going to have to make it possible for yourself to get your needs met on a regular basis in your real life, but start with this boot camp, start with this introversion binge, start with giving yourself flooded whatever it is that you need, and then move on to a life where you give yourself permission to have whatever you want whenever you want it, basically, but recognize that it's always available to you and you're not going to want it constantly. Some other examples for this would be like fun, needing fun. Sometimes you're like, oh, what if I like go on vacation and have the fun that I want and then I never want to go back to my life and I never want to go, like, it'll just be too much. No, most of the time you can have a ton of fun and then you're like, I'd like to get back to like stability now. I'd like to get back to my life, There is an end point if you truly let yourself go there. Another would be needing quiet. A lot of people don't give themselves enough quiet time, or rest. Rest is a huge one. People are terrified of being lazy. They're terrified of being lazy. So they're like, oh my God, I cannot rest or I will never stop resting. But that's not true. You will. If you truly rest long enough, you will stop resting. You will be like, I want to go for a walk. I want to do a thing. That is how we operate. Trust that there is an endpoint to all of these needs. Sexual pleasure is another one, or needing intimacy is a huge one. People are like, I need so much intimacy, I'm craving it so badly, and that they are afraid if they start giving themselves any, they'll never stop. And again, we can see that that just means they've had a deprivation of intimacy, maybe a deprivation of being truly seen or have someone hold space for them. But give yourself that stuff. Find a therapist, find a support group, find a tantric breathing exercise to do with your partner, or a tantric class where you're doing this paired up with people, and you're getting so flooded with intimacy and connection that you're like, oh, I actually want to be alone now, and I actually want to, I want to do something else. I want to focus on some other aspect of my life now, because that part is set. That dragon is asleep. So think about it from this perspective and see if you can trust that there is an end point and give yourself all of it that you need until you're done, until you're sick of it, until that dragon is asleep. And then move into a life with more balance, a life where you honor the fact that you can have this whenever you want, but there is no end point that you need to be afraid of. There is no dragon that's going to swallow you whole if you start getting this need met. It's just a need. It'll come and go. If you actually satiate it, you'll feel better than if you try not to satiate it because you're afraid of what that will do or where that will take you. So really let yourself satiate it and then build a life around getting your needs met. And this can be a huge game changer. All right. That's it. Enjoy, and leave your thoughts in the comments, please. And if you want to submit a question to me, you can go to my website at jessineelan.com /contact/ and leave me a question if you want me to answer it. I get a bunch of questions and I pick and choose them, so I can't guarantee that it'll be answered, but I love hearing your questions, especially when they're really specific like this, so that we can get really into the nitty-gritty. And that's all for today.